Howdy folks, I made this bag a while back for my Markwell Kentucky rifle, and I use it for carrying paper cartridges and stuff. I got a pocket here with separating one kind of powder paper cartridge from another, and got my caps in that outer pocket, and I've got this inner pocket. And this was stitched on the inside, no gusset, and then I got this pocket in the front. Now, this is a little on the small side, and since then I bought this 1860 Army. So I'm going to take my pattern and kind of loosely copy it to make a bigger pattern. So the first thing that I like to do when I'm making a pattern is square off my edge here and an edge here. It just helps keep a little neater. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go along, and I'm going to fold this roughly in half. It's not going to be exact because both of my edges aren't square. I just squared off the one. That just helps you so you know that you're square on the bottom, because that's going to matter later if you're not. If you're a little bit off like I am here, then I just trim that. Make sure you're square. Okay. Now, I'm going to lay this in. And I'm just going to trace this, so I know for sure that I'm getting one that's bigger than the one I already made, but I want the same basic look. So, okay, I'm still on the camera. So I'm going to come down, so this is about 6.5 that way, 5 that way. My hand barely fits in there, so I think I want to come out another 1.5 inches, which means I need to come out from this line another 3/4 of an inch. I'm just going to do that here, the reference point. And I think I'm going to come down another 1.5 inches in the bottom. Now, I'm just going to take my pencil, and I'm going to roughly connect these dots. So that's my basic outline. I don't know how well you can see that. Just take a regular pair of cheap craft scissors. I think I paid like $3 for these. Just cut along that line. If you're a little off here, doesn't matter. You got it folded in half. It's going to be exactly the same on each side. I'm just using that line as a rough guide. I'm not following it 100%. That's what you end up with. Now you got to figure this one 6.5, and what did I say? I wanted it about 1.5 inches longer than that, so I need to come up. So was that 6.5? I need to come up to flip this around. No wonder this isn't making sense. Okay. Come up to 7.5. See how that looks. Otherwise, I might do 8. I am going to go another 1/2 inch up. And like I said, this doesn't have to be exact. I'm just going to take. Flap even if possible here. Hopefully I'm getting this in the camera. Just a little bit off. You can make a straight edge there and that can help too. I just didn't this time, probably should have. And middle up. There we go. So you can line that fold in the middle up on your flat. So there's the main body. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it. So it's like that. Fold this down. Fold this back. And I'm just going to take my scissors. Don't need to draw a line or anything. I'm just going to cut just like that. That's my front panel. That's my back panel with my flat. This, you won't be tracing inside of here. It's just when you fold it over, and that makes your inside pocket. That'll be your main pocket, because that's going to be exactly the same as the backing. Now, I'll grab another piece. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take another sheet here. Sure it's at least as big as this. This is going to be my front pocket. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take my pencil, I'm going to roughly just eyeball it, go along the inside, trying to keep it as straight and even as I can. If you had a compass or something like that, you could get more precise here, but I don't need to be that precise for what I'm doing. Big, so we're just gonna want to cut them a little big to start with, because you can always make them smaller, but you can't make them bigger. Just keep in mind when you're trimming them and you have them folded in half, it doesn't look like you took off much, but you got to remember that's double because it's on both sides. I think I want to trim that a little bit more and flatten out the bottom. One more little trim here and we'll be done. You got to keep in mind when you're not putting a gusset on these things that edge is going to be rolled inward when you're sewing. When you're stitching it, you're going to do an inside stitch. So there's my pocket, my main body, and my front panel. So it took me about 10 minutes. Obviously I could do it a little faster if I wasn't trying to do it on camera. Hopefully the camera picked it up. I'm kind of trying a new camera angle, but so that's the pattern, and we'll move on to the weather. Right, so I'm just going to show you quick how I mark this and cut out the main panel. I'll do the same thing for the front panel and the pocket. Start with, I'm going to use this C.S. Osborne scratch awl. You want to lay this in where you're not going to run into any of these bends like what's right here. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but it's kind of fuzzy looking. It's a little tighter grain over here, so you want to try to avoid getting it next to that as much as possible, because it's not going to look right, and it's not going to be as durable. Of course, that especially down here where you're going to be sewing. Up here on the flap, it's not near as critical, but you still want to avoid that as much as possible because it doesn't cut very good either. So I'm just going to take this all and trace around, kind of keeping it as flat as possible. Now this bag, obviously, since it's for an 1860 Army, it's 1860s era, so I don't have to be 100% historically accurate on, like, if you wanted to make a shot pouch for a flintlock in the 1700s. This style is kind of a copy of more of the Revolutionary War style, but I'm going to be using a more 19th century looking closure. Same thing, just a button stud or finial, I can't pronounce it right, but something like that. So anyway, that's how you trace it out. I'm just going to take my round knife. This has just got a piece of leather with the rough side stapled to a board with some jeweler's rouge rubbed on it. And I usually strop this a few times before I use it to make sure I got a decent edge. So then I'm just going to cut along that line. This is pretty thin leather, I'd say 3 to 4 ounce. Got it from Springfield Leather. It's a chrome tan, oil tan inside, is what it originally was. So about all I got left is, this is the biggest piece I got left of it. I had some straps pre-cut. I always cut some straps as soon as I get a height in. I cut a straight edge and get some straps out of it to make sure I don't get halfway done with the project and realize I forgot to save room for a strap. Helps a lot to move your piece of leather around, so if at all possible, like if this was a bigger piece of leather, I would be starting on this side where there was more leather on this side, so I could get your main part that you're cutting away from the rest of it, so it's easier to manage. Especially since I don't have the biggest table in the world for doing this. I'm getting into where it was a little bit fuzzy there. Like I said, when it's on the flap and on the edge where there's not going to be any real tension, it's not a big deal. It's just a little harder to cut. A lot of times I end up having to go around everything a second time because you get a little bit of fibers that just aren't quite cut all the way through the first time. Chrome tan, usually going around once or twice is enough. Vegetable tan, this is an Al Stolman round knife. Not the greatest thing I ever bought, but it works. For certain corners and stuff, this will get better than anything else. But if I had it to do over again, I'd have spent a little more money and got a C.S. Osborne. But I already spent the money on this, and I'm not a professional, and this works good enough for what I'm doing. Being kind of stubborn today. there's my main panel. Something else I'm going to show you before I cut the camera off and do some stuff off camera. I'll lay my pattern in with the ends folded down. Just get it as close to the edge as possible here. Square it up. I'm just going to take my awl, mark the top edge, just a little mark. And I got my adjustable stitch groover. I really like this style. It's different than what you usually see. I got it in a kit off of Amazon that they don't sell anymore. I don't know what this style is called, but I prefer it to the other kind. I'm just going to go where I made that mark and just go along the edge here and make my stitch line. By the way, my cutting surface here, it's just a plywood table, but I've got thick Lexan plexiglass and pieces they threw out at work. I nailed down here, and it makes a really good cutting board. Seems to be pretty durable too. And then I go to that other mark, so that's all marked out, ready to chisel. I'll get the other two pieces cut out. I may have to do some splicing to get the front panel in the pocket, because I don't know that I have a big enough piece here for both of them, but I'll get that done off camera and then we'll pick up on the next step. Okay, just so if I didn't make it clear when I was making the pattern, so this is the main pattern, this is the front panel, so I just lay that in and I traced around it and then I'll cut that out. Alright, so when I was making the pattern, I forgot to make a pattern. Well, I didn't make a pattern, but I forgot to talk about this part here that attaches with thread right there, and then these two little things that attach to the back. So for this, I already got this. I dug this leather. If you're using thicker leather, you wouldn't need to do two and line it. But for this thinner stuff, to get a good tight closure, you need to thicken it up. So I glued them together with Leathercraft cement. Just the fibings stuff. This stuff's worth its weight in gold for just if you're tacking to sew. Anyway, glue them together with that. And for the end, I just stuck a lid, something, any kind of lid that's the right size. And then you take your utility knife, one laying around here somewhere, and then you just make little cuts all the way around till you get that. Otherwise, you got the right size round end punch. That's an easier way to go. I probably could have done that, I just didn't, because that would have made a lot of noise and my kids are already in bed, so I did it by hand. But that's what that's about. So I got my chisel holes already in there, and then I lined it up where I wanted it on there, marked it through this with an awl into the main part of the flap here, and then chiseled that. So then I made a pattern for where my straps get attached, which then becomes these. So I grooved the edge here and chiseled that with a 2-prong flat chisel. Got those off of Amazon. But to make this, took a scrap piece of cardboard, you fold it in half, and then I measured from my outside edge where the fold was a 1/2 inch, because when you unfold it, that gives you an inch. So I marked a couple places, made a line, and then I just made a circle here with my pencil and just kind of eyeball it and trim it as you need to get the right thing. So pretty crude, not a whole lot of skill there, but that's how I made that. And then just took my main body, laid it in and then just laid these so they'd be even. Took my scratch awl and just poked through, making marks with each one of those chisel holes till I got all the way around. And then took my 2-prong chisel and just hammered them out all the way around. I already got this one sewed on. I intended, if I would have been thinking, to sew it on the other way with the rough out on the outside. I wasn't thinking, and I sewed it that way. I could cut it off and redo it, but I noticed it when I was almost done, and I hate cutting it off and redoing it. And as you can see, that's all you're going to see, and then your main strap is going to be over that and attached with lace. So it'll be like this. But my main strap will be covering most of that, so I'm just going to leave it and do the other side the same way. So I got to get that stitched on before I stitch the main part. So the big thing here is my pocket. So the pocket is going to be on the front panel, so the smaller one. Now what I do when I'm making where I'm going to put these pockets, I usually just kind of lay them in where I think it looks good. And then I'll take my ruler and I'll just pick a spot. In this case, I'm going to go corner to corner. I'm going to, let's see, that's about 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to come over here from that corner. I'm already at 1.5 inches, and then I measure these corners 3/4. I was at 3/4, so that's right about perfect. Just eyeballing it, I got it pretty well centered. So I'm just going to lay my hand in there, and then I'm just going to make a mark in my, I've already chiseled this. So I'm just going to make a mark every 3 or 4 chisel holes all the way around that. There might be a better way to do this. I've never really seen videos on other people doing it. This is just what I figured out, and for how many I do, it doesn't have to be any more efficient than this. It works just fine for what I'm doing. And come out with a pretty consistent looking result. When you get on the corners, you want to do every one or every other one for a while, so you make sure you get that bend right. So otherwise you might get a little off when you're chiseling. You could poke all these with the awl one at a time. I just find it faster and easier on my hands to use the chisels. I'm going to use a 4-prong for this. So I got a piece of like granite here. This won't have to be there. I just have it there if I need to cut something quick. I can cut on that. And I got a scrap piece of leather and a poly punch cutting board thing here that I got off of Amazon. So now I'm just going to take this, line up with those marks, and then you want to do first time and your last hole. So when I'm moving this, drop stuff off my table here. I don't know if you can see that chisel, but okay, so right there. So when I'm putting this in, I'm putting it right there. So I'm only punching 3 holes at a time, even though this is a 4-prong. So I'm just going to go around connecting the dots. And I don't think this one's going to be a problem. But sometimes you get too tight of a curve. I on purpose I made it so there wasn't a tight curve, but if you get too tight of a curve, then you just switch to a 2-prong and do 1 hole at a time around the curve. And when you get to a straighter stretch, switch back to the 4. It'll work just fine. If you try to do a 4 on too tight of a curve, you're going to end up with it more angular and off center, and it just doesn't look as good, and it's harder to sew. So you need to switch to a 2-prong, but I don't think I need to in this particular case. I'm going to finish chiseling this out. So you'll need to sew your pocket on to your front panel and your strap holder things, billets, whatever you want to call them, onto the back of your main body before you stitch the main body together. So I'm going to get this chiseled out and get all that, the first stuff I got to get sewn on, and then I will start the process of sewing it together. So that's where I'll start the video back up again. Okay, so I got my strap attachment doodly bobs onto there. Got this all sewed on. Took me not even half hour probably to sew this on and sew that other one of these on. I can sew the closure flap thing after I get the rest sewed together. So I'm going to stitch this inside out, which means I need to put two faces together. I've already got my John James harness needles on my thread. A nice long tail on that thread. Thread's about 6 foot long. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to count down 4 chisel holes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to come in that, and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Take my other needle, go above that, get it started. Those two through the same hole. I'm going to line up the bottoms and just pull it tight. That way I get even lengths of thread on each side. This is the hardest part, is sewing inside out, because you really can't see your holes. You're just kind of guessing. Sometimes you can open it up and look at the inside and get them. Once you get past these first few holes where you can use a pony, then it goes a lot better. And it just starts to automatically line up as you get a few done. This is by far the hardest part right here. Once you get that started, then you can slip it into a stitching pony. This is one I made myself. You can buy them as well. Tighten that up. So now I went up 4 stitches, or 4 holes, 3 stitches. Now I'm going to go back down the other direction, so that way it's double stitched at the top. And I'll do that again when I'm done on the other end. So, like I said, I got about 6 feet of thread here, which is probably more than I need, but I hate splicing halfway through a project if I can help it. An arm's length is pretty manageable because you can have longer tails. I don't tie any kind of knot, I just run it through, and then as you go your tails get shorter. Typically put my thread in my next hole, stick my other needle in, and then I crisscross them, make an X, go part way through, do the next hole, and pull it tight. That way I'm only going all the way out once for every 2 holes. With this project you could probably get away with doing 3 like that. If you do 4, it'll start to bind a little bit. Yeah, you could do 3 with this thin leather, especially chrome tan. If you're doing vegetable tan like a gun belt or a holster or something, a lot of times you're only able to get 1 or 2 at a time, a lot of times only 1. But it can definitely speed up your stitching process. You can do it this way and not have to pull all of that leather through every single time. So anyway, I'm going to continue stitching the entire perimeter, and then I'll show you how I end off my thread. Okay, so I've sewn all the way to the other edge. I'm going to come back down to my second hole. Into my third hole. Into my fourth hole, and I'm just putting them both in the same hole, making an X, pushing them and pulling them like so. Now I'm just going to come through that 5th hole with 1 needle, pull that through. And I'm gonna just make a square knot here. Pull that good and tight. Trim that off. And just take a Bic lighter, leave a little tail, you burn those ends. And that wax will kind of melt that and seal it. So now that I got that done, this is the fun part. This one shouldn't be too terrible, but you gotta get this thing from inside out to right side out. Which usually isn't the easiest part of the project. Sometimes you can, I use a shed antler. Use anything that's good and sturdy, but antler seems to work the best because you can get into the little nooks and crannies with the antler tip on the main beam. This one's perfect because it's got no points. Started. Once you get it to a certain point, then it gets easier. Straighten that out. I just got to add my flap, my button closure, and the straps, and we'll be done. I don't know that I'm going to do anything to finish the edges on this since it's supposed to be like a rustic cap and ball possibles bag, but decent amount of room in there. You could put your powder shot, put the caps in this pocket, tools, or if you wanted to have paper cartridges with boxes, you could probably fit at least half a dozen or more in there, plus your caps, tools in the front pocket like I said. So anyway, I'll get that flap stitched on, get the strap prepared, and then I'll show you the finishing touches and finished product. Alright, so the next thing to do is, I already got this sewed on, so I laid that on top, centered it, just eyeballed it, poked through with my awl, and then chiseled it, sewed it together. That's what the back looks like. So the next thing to do is to lay it in, center it, I just eyeball, go through the hole that I already had in that, and just make a mark. And this is just a piece of a pine 2x4, and I wrapped some poly tape around it. Stick that in there, and then let's take a hole punch. This one's the right size for my little snap button things. Got that. And one other thing I'm gonna do. So I'm going to attach the strap with lace. So this is just a piece of scrap. Just a 1/2 inch hole punch. I'm going to do two things here. I'll take that circle I just made. I'm going to use that as a washer on my button snap thing. What I'm going to do here, if I can get that to fit in there. So this is a lace maker, and it's got different places for different size lace. Get a tail started. piece of scrap. I just got about 5 foot of lace. So this is what I'm going to use to attach my strap. So first though, so all this is just a little brass button, and then it's got a screw that goes through the back side. So I'm going to put my screw through my little washer thing I made. Push it through that hole. And I like to take just a little tiny drop of Weathercraft cement. Don't need much, just about that much. Screw that onto there. And that glue will help keep the thread, or the threads from the screw from backing out. So that's that. Got that done. Now on the ends here I've tapered them, and I got these holes, so that's to attach right here. And on the other end I've got a series of double holes, and that's to attach it to the other piece of strap, which just has one set of double holes, and then this side. So lay that over the top. Make sure you taper the ends so you can get them in and out of the holes. With my project, I just set everything on the table and I can't find it when I need it. So you gotta, for this style, I go the same hole, make a loop. Go through the same hole on my bag. Through just one hole on the top. Another one. Kind of leave everything loose till you get everything threaded where you need it. Pull that through the loop, tighten the back, cinch up the front. So that's what the end result of that will be. And for this, I already kind of draped it around my shoulder and figured I needed to be about in the center. So I'm just gonna, again, cut another piece of lace at an angle. Not measuring this, obviously, it's just whatever. Doesn't have to be too precise. This one just threading them through a hole. And go down to the next one. Like that. Through the back side, the other one. What the back looks like, and that's what the front looks like. So I'll attach the other side and then we'll be done. Okay, so I got the bag all finished. That's what it looks like at the end. So that's finished product. So plenty of room. Got my cap tin there. Can fit a powder flask, powder measurer. Got a bag of round balls, wads or lube. You could put earplugs in there, nipple wrench, nipple pick, stuff like that. There's still a fair amount of room in there. Plenty of room in the outside pocket if you wanted to put some more stuff in there. I might end up just carrying paper cartridges in it and a few other accoutrements, but I think I could make my hole a little bigger on the closure here. Yep. So other than that though, turned out really good. It's got a nice, see the strap there adjusts and back, and the lace down here. So, and if like this is a little longer than I needed, I might shorten this, but like for all intents and purposes, it's done. It's functional. It works great. Like I said, pretty much the only thing is I need to enlarge that hole, but that's not a big deal. You want to start out small with these things. If they end up being too small, it's pretty easy to make them bigger. The other way around, not so much. So anyway, that's a homemade leather black powder possibles bag that looks somewhat authentic to the 17 and 1800s era, the cap and ball era mostly. So now I have a bag specifically for my 1860 Army, and I think it turned out pretty good. Thanks for watching.